Deliver at all. I'm delighted to have him here with us, and he's going to deliver the talk entitled An Englishman in Porto Alegre. So we are going to hear about some different cultures, different perspectives, but we are also going to travel through language, not only through different plays and spaces. He's a translator, an actor, a singer. He's a professional teacher since 1990. He studied at the International House, London, and his published works are Guia de Pronúncia do Inglês para Brasileiros, published in 2002, and Manual para quem ensina inglês, published in 2004. He's passionate for gardening, music, urban architecture, history, cooking, and all things meat. So I really hope you can enjoy this opportunity. It's not every day that you have a native speaker of English to talk to us. And you'll be more than welcome at the end of this talk to ask questions, to interact. Because I believe the more we interact in English, the more we learn. Okay, thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to speak slowly because I don't know the exact level of your English, so for some of you it might be a little boring, and for some of you it will be okay, so I'll do that. When I was invited to come here, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? Okay, I live in Porto Alegre, I'm English, so what? But I thought, I've taken, I don't know how many taxis in my life, and now Uber and other things. And I would say I've probably talked about something that I'm going to talk about today well over 1,000 times. Because within 10 seconds, com meio sotaque maravilhosamente inglês and português, people perceive in a very small piece of time that I'm not Brazilian. And so we're in the car and I say where I'm going, and then of course comes the first one, você não é daqui, né? Or, você é americano? And then, of course, I say, well, yes, I'm English. And then comes the question, tanto gosta daqui? And then another question is, quanto tempo tu mora aqui? And then the other question is, você é londrino? And then they say, mas por que tu veio aqui para Porto Alegre? And so I'm going to talk about something in relation to this, because most people ask me sooner or later this question. Well, I was a professional actor, and then when I was 29, I suddenly thought, I don't want to do this very uncertain thing for the rest of my life. Maybe I was seeing people who were like 40 going to the same auditions or tests, and I thought, that'll be me, like that. And maybe, I don't know, I decided I wanted something more concrete. I was a bit lost. Then through all sorts of very strange coincidences, which I won't bore you with now, but they were very strange coincidences, I ended up teaching pronunciation to 3 Brazilians in London. And in that year's experience, I was working somewhere else. I thought, I like this. I think I'm even good at it. And then I thought a bit more, and in the end I decided to do the course and become a TEFL teacher. In other words, a teacher of English as a foreign language to foreigners. And I needed to have experience abroad. Now my partner at that time was Brazilian, and I'd never been to Brazil. And I thought, well, the most obvious place is Brazil. I thought, São Paulo. It's the only place I knew. And, well, Rio. And my friend said, no, the cultural shock would be too much for you. You need to go to Curitiba or Florianópolis or Porto Alegre. For me, it was Timbuktu. I didn't know anything about Brazil, very ignorant. Like our friend before, my geography isn't brilliant, and I didn't know much about Brazil. Then a friend of a friend of a friend's very long story, I went boy with it, said, I know somebody in Porto Alegre. So I wrote, at that time we had letters. with pens and envelopes. We posted them. And that was my communication. So I sent this letter, I got one back, and we exchanged. And his name's Robin Klein, and he's been here longer than I have. And he invited me to Cultura Inglesa. And I set off. And I want an adventure. But here comes the first question. You see, why do you go abroad? Well, the first thing was, people said, Philip, if you want to really get on in your new career, you must go abroad. So it was like, okay, a year, maximum 2 years, and then I'll go back to London, and then I'll continue with my career, and things will happen. So I arrived in Porto Alegre. And I remember looking on the map thinking, oh, it's near Uruguay and Argentina, fantastic, I'll get to know some other South American countries. I came by ship. It was a cargo ship from Poland. That was another dream of mine. I always wanted to take a big journey, but I didn't want a cruise ship. I think they're really boring. It's like a kind of giant shopping center on the sea, and it just doesn't appeal to me. I wanted to actually work on the ship. Sadly, 1 month before I traveled, they changed international law, and I wasn't permitted to work on the ship. I had to go as a passenger. But anyway, I went, and it was 3.5 weeks on the high seas, including a terrific storm. And I actually thought I wasn't going to arrive in Brazil. I genuinely thought that. I thought, that's it, my destiny is to go down with the ship. But I did arrive. Okay, taking too long in the story. I arrived here, and what did I think about Porto Alegre? I thought it's lovely trees. It was very hilly. I didn't know the center. I was in Anita Garibaldi, somewhere near there. And I remember taking the bus after about 2 weeks. And I nearly got off. I never heard any of that praça, where Bradesco is, after Independencia with Mostradero and that way. And I nearly got off and thought, God, is this it? It's this little square, this is the grand. And then, of course, I decided to stay on the bus, and I arrived in the center. And I saw Porto Alegre. I was fascinated by it. I'm still fascinated by it, and it's 25 years later. What I want to say is, when you arrive in a new place, you're foreign, you're very foreign, but it's an adventure, so it's fine. You're having fun, and my Portuguese was really bad. I will tell a few ghastly stories about my Portuguese. And for me, I was going back to England. So everything was just an excuse to know new things and push the boat out, which is one of the things I'll talk about. But Portuguese, my Portuguese was like this. And I thought, I'll just learn. I'll learn in the street. I'll learn talking to people. I tried not to get English friends because I wanted to socialize with Brazilians so that it would give me more chance to speak. And of my stories, the first one I did, this was ghastly. I was actually in Guarulhos. And I brought this to show people who may not know this historic item. It's a cassette tape. And in those olden days, we used to use them a lot, and I used it for teaching, I used it for pleasure. And when you wanted a blank one, in English it's a blank tape or a virgin tape. So I was thinking, oh, well, words, sort of Latin-sounding words. So I went into a little shop, very narrow shop, and there was a young boy and a young girl there. And I spoke to the boy, and I said, você tem cassete virgem? And he understood, and actually he sold me this one, which I still have. But that wasn't all. That wasn't all. It got worse. It got worse. Then when I was taking a taxi, and I was going to, in fact, in Britannia, School of Britannia, in Dr. Tomati, and I was feeling quite confident with my Portuguese, and we were driving along, and I said, Dr. Tomati, please. He's okay, and then he suddenly said to me, qual altura? And I thought, what a funny question. So I said, oh, 1.90 m. And he continued. But the worst, probably the worst, was in Livramento. A student of mine invited me to go to Livramento. I was very happy to go. We went with his girlfriend and a friend. And we stayed 3 days. Now, I'm celiac or celiac, so I can't eat gluten. So I needed to learn things like aveia, centeio, cevada, farinha de trigo, to be sure that I didn't have any sort of mistakes. But of course, I didn't know gíria or slang. And we were leaving in his little fuk. And he suddenly said, I was sitting in the front, and everyone behind, he said, então, o que vocês acharam de minha veia? I said, eu não sei, mas acho que não comi tua veia. Not a horrible one. And, it was awful. And he was laughing so much he stopped the car. Of course, I didn't know why he was laughing. That happens. Well, what I want to say is, when you go to a foreign country, you have to be prepared. You're going to look stupid sometimes. You can't help it. It's part of it. And Brazilians, you Brazilians, nobody ever made me feel stupid or silly. They just laughed with me. And I always felt very welcome, which is a very important thing to say. Another thing, English people are very nice. I'm one. But in Brazil, something that doesn't happen in England. I'm very open, yes. I like to talk to people and I'm ready to converse quickly. But here, it might be criticism. Sometimes Brazilians are a bit forward. You know, they say, I don't know, after 20 seconds, are you married? Have you got children? How much do you earn? This kind of question. But the positive side is that people open their hearts very quickly. And I think this attracts people from Europe, Northern Europe, because it's not so common. And so I've enjoyed so many wonderful conversations. Sometimes I never see the person again, but we just share something. And I think this is a beautiful thing of you people. And maybe you don't necessarily know it, but it is a characteristic which is very, very nice and very attractive to people who come from the northern hemisphere, where things take longer. It's not quite so simple. Okay. What do I want to talk about here? Okay, the impact first, yes. Things like chimarrão. Somebody gave me a chimarrão, I took it and then I passed it on. It was rude. And at the same time, somebody gave me a caipirinha and I held on to it. And then they said, no, you passed that as well. Okay. So I was a bit confused. I thought you pass on the caipirinha, but you don't pass on the chimarrão and things like that. Churrascos, I went to my churrascos and I thought they were amazing. Something I'd like to talk about Rio Grande do Sul. I was also lonely. Now, it's not uncommon, I'm sorry, for anyone who goes anywhere, whether they're from another state or whether they go to a different city or a different country. Loneliness will come into it because you're on your own. Unless you've gone in a group or with somebody else, you do spend a lot of time on your own. Sundays were interminable. And that's when I missed my family more than anything else. Something, I'll say a negative side here, okay? But that's okay. I've said a good thing to you now. I'm saying negative. Something a taxi driver told me right at the beginning, in the first 3 months. I'd arranged a dinner. Now in England, it's really common to arrange a dinner 10 days before. And you arrange it, everyone says yes. Now you do not need to then say, está confirmado? Right? You don't need to say that because it's understood. It is. You said yes. If you said yes, you go. There's no question. And I did this dinner, and half the people didn't come. Now, I didn't have a telephone. I had a Mobi. And it was a kind of thing you stuck here, and you got a message. And they didn't even send a message. I was very disappointed. And I mentioned it to a taxi driver. And he said to me, I don't know what your plans are, but here in Rio Grande do Sul, he said, family is number 1, and friends come in second place. And he said to me, if you marry here, he said, one Saturday you'll go to your parents, if they lived here, and the other Saturday you go to your in-laws, and so it goes on. And it was something that I did feel, because colleagues at school would say to me things like, do you know Gramado? And I said, no, what's Gramado? Oh, it's a city in the mountains. And, oh, how exciting. You must go there. Yeah, who knows? And I never got invited. And I didn't get invited to people's houses, especially on Sunday, because I wasn't family. I wasn't part of it. And this this was very strange for me because in London, we used to receive lots and lots of people, mostly Brazilians, and I thought, I was expecting to have the same treatment here, and it didn't happen. However, what I did realize is that here in Rio Sul, when you make friends, you've made them. I've got friends I made 23, 24 years ago. They're still friends. They're good friends. And again, this is a very positive thing. There's a kind of loyalty, fidelidade, here in Rio Grande do Sul, which I think is very beautiful. And of course, it attracts me, and I'm still here. And it's one of the reasons. Okay. Oh, another thing, yeah. Something I couldn't understand. I arrived in the winter, and I was used to lovely, cozy pubs in London, you know, nice and warm. And I went to these bars, and they were like garages, sort of wide open, and they're serving you ice-cold beer. And there were these people all like this. Or, are they happy? This is awful. It's just cold. And I just couldn't understand it. It was really weird for me, but, you know, that was it. What I want to say is that I don't know what the plans, all your plans are, what you might do in your lives. But something I think is very important. One of the restrictions in Brazil, it's such a big country, it's got these states, and they're all very independent. But, for example, probably most of you are local people. In England, I would say 1% of the university students go to the university in their town. About 1%. The rest go off at 18, boom, off to another part of the country. This offers a chance to become independent very early, because you have to. It's something that doesn't happen here for all sorts of reasons. So it's very cozy. Sometimes you stay at home with mum and dad, and you've maybe had all your same friends all the way up to school, and sometimes at university. So it's quite difficult for you to actually see, well, what goes on outside Rio Grande do Sul? The other states, the other Brazilians, the other way of life, which is not Gaúcho, which is not from here. This, I think, can be a problem for you. And so part of what I want to say here is about using the expression, push the boat out. Now, I know that physically it might be impossible, logistically it might be impossible, because you have to go to the university, it's the system. But something I want to say here is about don't play safe, or don't always take the easy option. Because people said to me many times, oh, you're so courageous, Philip. Well, I don't know if I was. I was a bit, using the expression, foolhardy, which means I didn't think too much. I wanted adventure. I remember standing on the front of this huge ship, it was a massive cargo ship, and I thought, well, I'm like Titanic, you know, I was like Leonardo was at the front, but I was watching that, and I thought, somewhere over there is Brazil. And I was just all the time getting nearer and nearer to it. So it's about, I have another one here. Yeah, I'll put a few expressions up here, that common expressions in English. Down to there. Okay, here's an expression, a very old one. Faint heart never won fair lady, which means a heart which isn't courageous will never win the beautiful lady. In other words, you do have to have courage. I might use another pen. You need to have courage. You need to think, it doesn't matter if I don't know exactly what's coming. Take a risk, take a small risk. This one is a very good one to remember. Some of you may already have heard it. Life is not a rehearsal. In other words, a vida não é ensaio. It really isn't. You're very young, and I was young too, believe it or not, I wasn't. And I also thought, I couldn't imagine being older. Everything was kind of instant, and I looked at those poor people my age, and I felt sorry for them. I thought, how awful to be 57. But 57 arrives like that. Like that. I mean, life is very short. I'm not saying this to be depressive about it, but it's very short. You think it isn't, but it goes by in a flash. So in other words, you need to take the opportunities and be brave about it, and be open, be really, really open. Because if you're not open, you close the doors, you close everything. And so what I learned here was, be prepared to do different things, you know. So, for example, I became Síndico. Yes. 2.5 years. It was a very good experience. I learned about administration in Brazil and administrating people, which is even more difficult. I also led a movement called Movimento Cidades Livre. And this began because I went into Zafra supermarket near me, and I saw this massive building from wonderful Melnik to be built right in my street. And our street is little houses and small buildings. And I was outraged. I just thought, this is awful. So I knocked on the door of some of my neighbors. I said, do you know what they're going to do in our street? And I began a movement. Now, when I say began a movement, it kind of began with me, and it kind of turned into a movement. And we actually achieved a lot. People said, wow, it took an Englishman to do this. And I said, well, it didn't really, it just took Philip. I happened to be here, and I happened to be indignant about it. Again, it's an example, like, don't be complacent. I remember hearing this word, acomodado. Somebody told me once I was acomodado. I had no idea what they meant. He said, what's it mean to acomodado, Philip? And I thought, accommodated? Couldn't understand it. What it means is, don't just say, oh, it'll come to nothing. There's no point. What was it? Vai se estressar para nada. I heard that many times. But it is worth it. It really is worth it. We had a huge campaign, and for 3 years, in fact, Marcus knows about this campaign. He was a member of this. And we achieved a lot. We stopped the building for 3 years. We didn't save it from, or at least we didn't save the trees we wanted to save. But the company Melnik was obliged to plant hundreds of trees. And also, the council was obliged to register all the trees of importance in Porto Alegre because of our movement. And the movement stimulated other movements. And so here's an example where do something. It's no good saying, oh, somebody else will do it, or I can't be bothered, or it's just too much trouble. It is a lot of trouble. It is, but it's worth it. It's really worth it. It's like, it colors your life. You don't stay in the same thing. Something else. I'll tell you something that a teacher said to me. I was 11. We were all 11. I can take some water. My mouth is dried up like it is. We were all 11. We were all boys. And he said to us, he said, now boys, I'm going to tell you something which you'll all find ridiculous. We were 11. What's he going to say that you'll find ridiculous? He said, I want you all to think about your retirement. I was like, what? We're 11, you know? Well, what he went on to say was something that I have kept with me all my life. He said, now, many, many boys have different abilities. And he said, some of you will work in a supermarket. Some of you might open your own business. Some of you will become great businessmen, or you'll be a bank manager. But he said, whatever it is you do, you must cultivate your own personal interests and hobbies outside from that line, whatever it is you're going to do. Because he said, the man, because we were all boys, so he said, the man who does not have interests or hobbies will die within 2 years of his retirement, because there's nothing left in his life. And there is a lot of truth in that. If you meet some old people today, they're very active, people in their 80s, busy doing things, having amazing lives. And others are like, hey, you know, oh, it's another day, oh, God. They've lost interest, there's nothing going for them. And it's very, very, very important, this. Because the more you open, the more you see there are lots of opportunities. For example, I sing in 2 choirs. Believe it or not, I sing in the OSPA Junior Choir. I'm the youngest. I'm there because somebody offered me the chance to be the English monitor. I love singing, I said yes. I do feel a bit silly. I mean, they're all 17, 18, and there's me with them. But it's wonderful, because I'm their colleague. They don't treat me as Chi or Philip, or actually, could be even worse, one more about that. They treat me as a colleague. They're open, young, open people. That's one thing, I won't say that. Okay, now, do they have to ask in English the questions, or?
Yes, I think it would be good.
I don't want to, okay. Well,
some of them are looking forward.
Okay, so if you want to ask questions now, it doesn't have to be about what I spoke about, it can be anything else. If you're curious about it.
Who would like to ask a question? No, I've seen many questions.
You probably heard about the expression desfeita. How did you feel about it when you got in Brazil? Because I believe that it's not very common abroad.
Is that related to desfazer?
No. Desfeita is like when you go to someone's house and then you eat, you don't want to eat anymore, and the person says, do you want more? And then you say no, and then she's going to say to you, oh, but you're not hungry? The food was not good? And the people here call it desfeita.
Ooh.
You are
I'm
yeah.
isso bom de garfo. So I've never had this problem. I eat well, yeah.
Okay.
I never had that problem.
No, because I already heard the story that people found it very strange to get here, and people got sad with them because they didn't want to eat anymore. It was not like the food is not good. It was because they didn't want to eat anymore. And they wanted to know if you already passed.
Yeah, I think there is a cultural difference. In England, for example, if people offer you something at the table, you say no, they won't be asking you, oh really?
No,
you don't
no,
they
yes.
know.
Just say no,
if
thank
you say no, but you want to, you will be hungry. Here, we generally wait for people to say, oh, well, I'm
Yes.
sure you don't want. Okay, we'll have a bit more. So I think the culture
Yes,
is a little bit
maybe, yeah. I know that the thing is still satisfactory. If you said I'm satisfied in English, it would be rather rude. But that's a language thing. You'd say no, thank you. I'm fine. You know, if I'm satisfied, it's like I'm satisfied, thank you.
They mean a lot of things.
Yes, it's not very pleasant. Another thing I always tell this to my students, because they want to be polite, especially new ones, and they come to the door and they say, "Com licença," or "excuse me." That's something we never do in England. You don't have to excuse yourself to go into somebody's house. So if you ever go to an English person's house, or American person's house, or anyone, English cultural, a language place where they speak English, you just go in, right? They say, please come in, and you say, thank you. You don't have to say, excuse me, because you're not apologizing, you're going in. So, okay. Did you have a question? No.
Others, what's there?
What kind of tips do you have to someone who is from here, for example, and is going to a new country where he doesn't know what is there? It's a new place for him.
Well, it's partly what I was saying earlier, and it happened to me, right? You have to be open, right? You have to be very, very open. Be prepared for surprises. Be prepared for things that are different, that you don't know. But you don't have to be afraid. There's no reason to be afraid, you know? You go, I didn't speak Portuguese. I was really like this, you know? I remember I could say, eu vou ensinar inglês. That was one expression I knew. And the other one was, eu vou tirar o lixo. I don't know why, but I knew that. But the idea is that you treat everything as an adventure. I mean, the plane trip, or probably wouldn't be a boat, the plane trip, when you arrive, of course, if you have contacts, it's very nice. But you're Brazilian, so you probably find it easier to talk to people socially. Now, English people might be a bit shy. I am a bit shy. Sometimes. But just be ready to meet people, chat to people, you know, and enjoy the thing. That's it, really. It's not so complicated. Okay, anything else?
How can you find a cargo ship to go from Poland to Brazil?
How did I find it?
Yeah.
I looked in the newspaper. There wasn't Google at that time. And I started looking for ship lines. And then I went in the yellow pages. And I looked for the cheapest, because I had that much money. And then I phoned them. I just telephoned and said, do you have cargo ships with passenger space? And they said yes. And then I went. And it was, I actually took two ships. I took a ship from London, Tilbury Docks, and I went up to Gdansk. And then I was supposed to wait 8 hours. And the ship was delayed, and I had 10 days in Poland. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, or at least you pushed me to mention that, because I did not speak Polish, as you can imagine. I had a Polish phrase book for the ship to be able to communicate with the people on the ship. And I was 10 days in Poland. And in Poland at that time, they spoke Polish and Russian. No English. I met one girl who said, "You are very lucky to meet me." And I said, "Yes, I am." And I had my Polish phrase book. Something that I say this to all my students. When you have necessity, I mean real necessity, because I was in a bubble. I was in a bubble. It was incredible. I couldn't speak a word. I didn't understand a word. I started learning. Which is, do you speak English? Which was always no. And incredibly, after 10 days, I was speaking basic Polish. I say this to anyone, "Oh, do you think I could learn the language? I'm over 40. I say, listen, makes no difference. If you want to learn the language, you learn the language. And I was speaking it. I watched television, I began to get some of the words. And I could ask how much things were, where do I go to get to something or other, how much is this, I want a return ticket to something. I use this a lot for my students to say, don't think you can't, because you can. It's up here. I never imagined I'd speak Polish. But I can't remember much now. But at that time I did speak it. So, and then I took the other ship, you asked me that, the big ship, 3.5 weeks, and it was the most fantastic experience of my life, I can tell you. If you think the sea is boring, you're wrong. It changes every day. The color changes, the sky changes, the waves change. I saw more stars than in all my life, because there are no other lights, just the sea. And I remember being called from my cabin. I had a huge cabin, I was very lucky. And it's just unbelievable. It was covered in stars from one end of the horizon to the other. Something we don't see because we live in cities and we have lights. It was worth it just for that. The storm, maybe I'd like to have avoided, but it's happened. Actually, I've got a good story about that. Okay, here comes a story. Have I got time? English people, England is full of ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. Well, I do. I'm not going to talk about a lot of ghosts now. It's not the focus of this. But I absolutely believe. I saw a ghost in Porto Alegre. Yes, I did. I thought it was somebody's husband, but it wasn't. That's another story. On the ship, I was on the ship in this terrible storm. And I was very, very afraid. And I remember I woke up because all my books and my cassette tapes fell off the shelf onto the floor because the boat was rocking so much. And I put on my coat and thought, I'm not going to die in my cabin. I'd rather jump off the ship. I'm not dying sort of Titanic-type death, you know. So I didn't want that. And I went up onto the bridge, because you were allowed to go on the bridge of the ship. And I never saw anything like it in my life. These massive, massive, massive waves, and it all go white. You couldn't see anything. And then the ship would go down, down, down like this. And then when it reached a certain point, the wave got caught in the propeller, and the whole ship was going like this, a huge ship. And then it would suddenly come up again, and as it did, a massive wall of water came right over the ship and all across the glass of the bridge. It was terrifying, and the wind, the sound of the wind was so strong, and the rain. And when you see waves on the beach breaking like this, I thought, oh, the sea just does this. And it doesn't. They break in the middle of the sea. And it's terrifying. It was terrifying. Well, my grandmother loved ships. And my mother said to me, how sad she died before you took this trip. And finally, I left the bridge and I went to my cabin. I didn't know what to do. I thought, I'll play cards, patience. And my grandmother taught me patience. And there are three kinds of patience. One is it's called clock patience. It goes around like this. It's very difficult to come out, right? It's more for children to learn how to tell the time. But I needed something to distract me. So I did it, and I did all the and it came out. I thought, oh well, I'll go to the other one, the one that goes in lines like this. So I did the cards, and I did the cards. Dun 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 dun. And it finished. I didn't have to stop once. It finished. Then I went on to a Polish version, which I play until today, which is much more complex. It's with strategies. And you think about 5, 6, 7, 8 moves ahead. You have to go through each one in your head and see, is it worth doing this or that? It's very difficult. And I did it. And the whole thing came out in the first go. And I suddenly had this very strong image of my grandmother's hands. And her name was Dodo, was the nickname. And I just remember saying, Dodo, I'm so glad you're here when I need you. And I went to bed. And I went to sleep. And for me, my grandmother was there. What I did was, subconsciously, I repeated the same words she'd said to me when I visited her in hospital when she was dying. And she said, Philip, I'm so glad you're here when I need you. And for me, you can believe what you want, but for me, my grandmother was there. And I know that she knew that if she had appeared and gone, darling, I might have died, right? But she didn't. She didn't. She manifested herself in the cards. And that's I'm sure of. That's I'm sure of. Anyway, that was a diversion. Right? End of that story. What was it you wanted to ask me?
Yeah, it was about the time of your trip, but you have talked in.
Oh, how long it took? Yes, 3.5 weeks, yes. Yeah. Then of course I arrived in Buenos Aires, because the ship got diverted. So, didn't actually arrive in Brazil. Is that a question, or you just stretching?
Any other questions?
I have one. So, here in Brazil, we have this habit, I guess, in which people try to define what's being important. Like what it means.
What, being
important.
important?
Yeah. So, we can say that's being conservative, but people created this view of how you become someone who is important to society, you know? So, when we're about to make the big decision of who do we want to be and what do we want to do, we try to follow this recipe of what can we do and what should we study to become someone who is important. I wanted to know, what do you think about that, and if there's such a thing in London? Like,
In England?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would say that would never be my criteria. I would never think, oh, I need to study something to be important. Because I think that's the wrong approach, completely, in my opinion. I think that when you choose what you want to study, it's because you need a vocation. You need something that stimulates you. I mean, imagine you become a very important lawyer, but you hate law. Or it doesn't really interest you, but you did it because you want to be this famous lawyer. It would be awful. I think one of the difficulties of being young is to know what you want to do. I wanted to be an actor, right, since I was 8 years old. So it was easy, except that it wasn't really. I think I could have done something else, but I was like this, I'll be an actor. But I think that the starting point should never be, I want to be something important. Because you will create the things yourself. Something that I was going to mention I didn't, about investing. It's what you invest. What you invest, you get back. I live in Porto Alegre. You might say, why Porto Alegre? For God's sake, it's like the bottom of Brazil. I say this, wherever you go, if you invest in the place, the place becomes something. You create it. You create your own world in that world. It's what I did here. And I think if you were thinking, oh, what do I do to become important? And someone would probably be very sad. You know, it's not going to work. I mean, if your only interest is what other people think about you, inside you're not going to be happy. I actually don't give a damn what people think about me. It's absolutely true. I don't. But then on the other hand, I believe in what I'm doing. So it's like saying, there was an old song, it was, if you don't happen to like me, pass me by. And I use that. If you don't happen to like me, you don't have any obligation to like me, go on your way. Don't be aggressive with me, but you don't have an obligation. And I really sincerely think, don't use that word importance, because you will become important in a sense if you truly believe in what you're doing. And you do it with all your heart and all your soul. I mean, I love teaching. I love it. I always say I'm never bored. I'm sometimes exhausted, but I'm never bored. I love the stimulation. The weekend life like that. And I'm happy. I don't often think about who is Philip. I remember people saying when I was doing the movement, Philip, você é um vereador. I don't want to be a vereador, thank you very much. You know, it's interesting.
Well, I meant that this was my perception among young Brazilians. And do you think that it happens in England too? Like a lot of young people just trying to follow a recipe to happiness and be important, whatever.
I mean, obviously, I'm not in with young people today, right? Although I have got nieces who are in their 20s. But, for example, my nieces, okay, let's use them as three English girls. They did not do that. They chose, one went into anthropology, and now she works in Zambia, helping villagers who may be affected by mining. And she goes there and finds out their needs, etc., and tries to make things as easy as possible. Another one ended up working with events and something else. I forgot what she's doing. And the other one became a teacher like me, an English teacher in International House, funny enough, where I did my training. But they all followed things that interested them. So if they're three examples of normal English girls, then they did not look at something about being important. I think that's a grave mistake. I think you just won't be happy. You'll always want something else, or you'll always be looking over your shoulder at somebody else, what they've got or what they've done, or I need to do it because they did it. I think it's very important to believe in yourself, what you do. Don't look at the other people. You don't need to. You look at yourself. Something else I was going to say, I'd forgotten, about being foreign. I said about being lonely. After 7 years here, I seriously began to think about going home. Because I thought, I don't know, I'm single. I'd rather be single in England. And I always had this feeling that although people were very nice to me, I was always looking in the window. I often felt I was looking through a window. I wasn't actually participating. And almost 19 years ago, I met my life partner. And suddenly, I had in-laws, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, nephews, nieces. And it was a bit overwhelming. I thought, oh my God, Brazilian family. No. But in fact, it was the key to really arriving in Brazil. Because suddenly, I wasn't just Philip the foreigner. No, I was part of the family. And this is something that people who go abroad, in Canada, wherever they decide to live. I think it's having a family around you which makes a difference. That really makes a difference. You get established. I'm not saying it's absolutely essential to do that, but it does have makes a huge impact.
Sorry guys, we are running out of time. I'd like to thank Philip so much. It was much more than a language experience. It was a life experience. Thank you, Philip.
Okay.